All right, we're now going to look at dividing complex numbers, but the first thing we're actually going to look at is when we're dividing a real number by an imaginary number. All right, so your first example is read 4 divided by 3i. I can rewrite that as 4 divided by 3i. My goal here is to get rid of the imaginary number in the denominator. This is not allowed. Your goal is to eliminate the imaginary number from your denominator. Now to do this, we are actually going to multiply by I divided by I. Now I'm allowed to do this because the imaginary number divided by the imaginary number, that is essentially just equal to 1. So nothing changes. Our expression will change, however. So what we get, we have 4 times I on the top, and on the bottom we end up with 3i squared. Now we all know that 3 times I squared, that's actually going to become negative 3. So my final answer will be the fraction of negative 4i divided by 3. All right, we're also now going to look at dividing a complex number. All right, so now as you notice, my denominator is now a complex number. I have my real part and my imaginary part. As I was saying before, my whole goal and my whole purpose of this is that I cannot have that imaginary number in the denominator, so I need to eliminate it. Now, if you remember, we had talked about something called a complex conjugate. And one of my main key ideas and points for you there was the fact that when you multiply a number by its complex conjugate, the imaginary number part goes away. So, that's just what we're going to do here. We're going to multiply our fraction by the complex conjugate divided by itself. Because once again, this is essentially 1. And I'm allowed to do that because it does not change anything. So, we're going to have to do that to the top and the bottom. So the top part, we're going to have a 4 times a 3 and a 4 times an I. It's really important that you don't forget that you must distribute it into both parts. All right, so I also have a plus 6i times a 3 and a 6i times an I. So I'm going to continue on with my life. And I'm not going to simplify yet. Now the denominator, another part that I pointed out for you in your notes in the last video, was that when you multiply a complex number by its complex conjugate, you essentially have a difference of squares. So rather than doing the whole process I just did above, I can rewrite this as a difference of squares, where I have my first term squared minus my second term squared. So now let's start to simplify. All right, the top part, I know that these will combine together. The 4i and the 18i, then will become 22i. The other thing that will change is I have I squared on top, so this will end up becoming a minus 6, because it was a plus 6 being multiplied by negative 1. So I'll have a 12 minus a 6 on the top, and that will create 6. 22i is left alone, so I bring him also down to my numerator. Now the denominator part, I said before we had a difference of squares. So 3 squared is really 9, and I squared is negative 1, so we really have minus negative 1, which this is just 9 plus 1. So it's really being divided by 10. Now my job in this one is actually not done yet because I can actually simplify my fraction even more. All of these are divisible by 2. So I could simplify my fraction by dividing everything by 2. 6 divided by 2 is 3. 22 divided by 2 is 11. And 10 divided by 2 is 5. You now have your fraction. And that was dividing complex number.